Hello, welcome back everybody. This is part 2 of the Hardest Hit Funds and Evolving program, and it certainly has from when it first started. As I reviewed in the last video, the Hardest Hit Fund first started back in 2010, and it was funded federally from the TARP funds, a Trouble Asset Relief Program, and the federal money was given to the states, and the states were then in charge of getting that money out to the individuals. And recently, this past summer, and again this summer, there's been another $2 billion injected into that and divvied up between these two states according to their needs and their applications. And the money has been allocated to different parts of it. So when they have a fund, they say, we're going to put this much here. We want to help the unemployed, so we want a certain money for that. We want to help the elderly, so we want a certain amount of money for that. We want to help principal reduction. We want to help all the other things we talked about in part one of this video. And of course, those programs are outlined like this. There are now programs where it all started on the delinquent side, bringing notes current, making mortgage payments moving forward, doing short payoffs, unemployment, elderly programs, cash for keys programs, and blighted properties. And then it evolved into let's help the people who stayed in their homes and are still making their payments, and that was through the principal reduction program. And of course, I told you now there's even down payment assistance programs where we're trying to get people back into those homes and taking care of those homes and bringing up the value of the neighborhood, cutting down on the criminal activity around vacant homes. All those things are a big part of it. Paying property taxes, it's a great idea to start allocating some of that money to those special programs. Now, the comment on this and the question I get a lot of times is, well, how do you keep up on all this stuff? And with this one, it's really not that difficult to keep up with. In fact, here's exactly how I do it. On the 10th of the month, every month, I'll do a little Google search here. Hardest Hit Funds, right? And that's really all it takes. So if I click on Hardest Hit Funds, and the first one underneath the ad is the Hardest Hit Fund U.S. Treasury. Okay, so I'll make that a little bit bigger so y'all can see where I am. Hardest Hit Fund U.S. Treasury. And I always go through that, by the way, Google, because the URL for this, as you might be able to see on the top of my screen here, the URL for this is about a mile long, right? So then rather than trying to memorize that, you could either just copy, obviously, and paste that link, or you could very simply just go to Google, because it's there very, very easily, and you land on this website. And of course, they have a remarkably similar map to the one that I use on my PowerPoint, right? So here's all the information, the various states. And by the way, I mentioned that $2 billion allocation, and you can see that it's in the opening paragraph right here. If you click on that, it shows you the states and how much money they received in the initial fund. Of that $2 billion, they already allocated the first $1 billion, all the various states, and how much more money they received through this program. Now, what I do when I'm researching this, on the 10th of the month, every month, I go over here to where it says reports. Okay, on the left-hand side here, I click on reports, and what I'm looking for is the monthly report to Congress. So it comes out on the 10th of the month every month. Now, this is the one that came out in March. And you can see the March report down here reports on February. So it's always a month back. So the March reports on February, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the whole TARP outline. So we don't have to go through the whole thing on this. We're really only interested in page 4 in regards to Hardest Hit Funds. And page 4 looks like this. So you can see in this past February 2017, there were no changes to any programs. Anytime a state wants to make a change in how they allocate these hardest hit funds, they have to ask the Treasury if that's okay, because remember, this is federal money coming to them. So there's still some control there that the Treasury Department has. We can also see here Illinois in February spent $143 million. Rhode Island in February spent $14 million. Drawn to date, you can see $7.2 billion. So every month they show the states and what they've allocated that month. They show the changes. And then there's a running total here showing what the total disbursement was and how much they have spent percentage-wise, also dollar amount-wise. So that comes out on the 10th of every month. Now, there was no activity as far as changes and modifications to the programs in this report. But if I go back here, if I go to this right on the bottom here now is where I'm looking. So I just went down from the reports and I went down to the monthly reports. I'm going to go to monthly report to Congress and click on that one. If I were to go back, let's say, to the January report that came out in 2017, reporting on December 2016, I'm going to do the same process here and just go to page 4. And when I go to page 4 on this report, you can see in December 2016, there were a lot of changes. So Tennessee, for example, received approval to add 2 new programs, a principal reduction program, which we talked about on the other video. That includes a recast and lien extinguishment components and a down payment assistance program, which we also talked about a little bit on the other video. Arizona received approval for down payment assistance programs. Michigan received approval to adjust its program and budgets. Mississippi has now a blight elimination program for greening and maintaining properties. And Illinois received approval for a reverse mortgage assistance program. And once again, Florida allocated $67 million that month, and Nevada $24 million, and the running total. So this is where I go to find out if there's any new changes on the programs. Now, once I see there's changes on a program, I will typically go back to the main page and then scroll down to the right-hand side under Resources and click on my state-by-state information. So Tennessee, which recently added that down payment assistance program, if I were to use that as an example, I could go here to this Tennessee 12th Amendment to the agreement. So you can see 12 times Tennessee has asked the Treasury Department so that they can modify their own program. South Carolina's done that 10 times. Let's see, 11 times in Rhode Island, 19 times in Oregon. You get the idea. So if I were to follow up on that Tennessee program and see what they have done for the principal reduction on that, I'm going to go really typically towards the bottom. So I'm going to zip right through this and go towards the end of this report. And I'm looking for these schedules, by the way. So this is Schedule B4, which talks about the down payment assistance program. So if I was interested in that, I can read all about that, where the program works. They've allocated $60 million to that program. Who can qualify, who doesn't qualify, how much are they willing to pay, what do they consider the property to be, does that include manufactured homes? So all the details of these, which they're going to pay $15,000 per household. So if people qualify, they get $15,000 in down payment assistance money. You might have a property right now in Tennessee that people are looking at buying, but down payment could become an issue. So that's the one program. And again, I'll just scroll up a little higher in this schedule and see what else we have here. This is the principal reduction. So this is the new program. So I found out about it in the congressional report. Then I go to the state and I look at what their amendments are. And this program, again, will give you all the details, the amount of money they've allocated, who, the people getting this money can't make more than $95,900 per year. Okay, so every state's going to have their own little things. And I think on this one it's $40,000. Okay, so they will pay up to $40,000 to the note holder if they bring that principal balance down on a performing note. Okay, so that's where the programs are. They're not difficult to keep up with. You just remember on the 10th of the month, or put it in your calendar and just say, let me just go check and see what any new programs that have been created from the Hardest Hit Fund program. So let me show you what I've done. What I've done is I've gone to every one of these states and I've read through each of those schedules, and I started creating a little spreadsheet for myself. So my little spreadsheet simply says pay up to, and that's the hardest hit funds for the catching up of the non-performing note, right? Paying the arrearage account. How many months, sorry about that, how many months moving forward that the state will pay on their behalf. And then I'm hitting my mouse there accidentally. And then I've got the application where they can go right online if it has a cash for keys program, if it has a principal reduction program. So you can see, for example, the states that I'm aware of right now that have principal reduction hardest hit funds: California, Florida, Alabama, Arizona, Nevada, and now Tennessee. Unemployment programs are here, what the phone numbers are. So all of this information that I compiled, the ones in red, by the way, are the states that were out of funds but now have funds available because of that $2 billion. That's why I've highlighted them in red. So all of this information that I've compiled on this little spreadsheet here, I did nothing more than go through the process that I just showed you, and I started filling that out inside an Excel spreadsheet, and I find that to be very, very handy a tool to have, especially when I'm looking at assets and I want to be able to go very quickly to see what that might do, because this could have a very, very impact upon your investments and upon their results. So hardest hit funds, it's good for you, it's good for the consumer, but it's absolutely an evolving program that will continue to evolve. I fully expect more states to allocate money towards principal reduction. I fully expect more states to allocate towards blighted property. I fully expect more states to allocate for the down payment assistance programs as this fund starts to play through. As it is right now, the initial funds expire at the end of this year, December 2017. Any money these states don't spend has to go back to the Treasury Department, which I would think that no money's going to go back, right? Every state's going to want to spend that on their citizens. And secondly, is on the re-release of the $2 billion, the states will have until 2020 to fully exhaust those funds, or once again, any unused portion goes back to the Treasury Department. I just can't think of any politician or anybody who's in charge of allocating these funds, if word ever got out that X number of millions of dollars went back to the Treasury simply because they could not spend it. I don't know how well that's going to be received by their citizenship. So I fully expect these states to allocate all of these funds. They're going to spend the money. How much of this goes to you and your company depends how active you are in this space. Hope you enjoyed this, everybody. Look forward to talking to you again, and until next week.